Hello, ABT folks. Welcome to, it's been a while since we've done a podcast episode, and this really is going to be a shortened type of thing. This is our 63rd episode, and Matthew is here joining me for this little discussion. It's only going to be about 20, 25 minutes, and it's just a little primer for next week's big event that we put together with David H Freedman, science writer, and I'm a huge fan of his, long time, probably 15 years or so, been following his work and talking with him a bunch. We're going to have a 90-minute in-depth discussion with him next week. And for all of the people that can make it that really want to dive in deeper, this is going to be a little bit of setup for you of what we're going to be talking about. And hopefully you can all manage to, as a matter of fact, if you want a PDF of his 2010 paper I'm going to talk about right now, send us an email and I'll send you the PDF to read in advance, because that'll help a lot for the discussion there and following everything. So here's just a few slides that I'm going to go through to set this all up, and then Matthew's going to jump in and join me. The entire discussion and all my interest with David really kind of fits under the heading of perception versus reality. I don't know why, but all the way back as an undergraduate, I remember being just really intrigued with this fundamental divide between perception and reality. So this is our prep session, and towards that end, let me begin by talking about the two areas here that we'll be getting into, specifically with his work. It's about research and it's about accuracy of the research community and things of that sort. But there's actually a direct parallel to everything we have to say about in the research world, which is in the legal world. It's the same basic thing. It's the struggle between noise and signal. And so we can begin by talking about what's our dream for both the legal and research worlds. And we've got several lawyers, that join us here in our ABT Kindred Spirits group. So this is partly geared for them. The dream in the legal world is that we would end up with a society or legal system in which we have attained complete certainty, that every single trial is so thoroughly investigated that we get all the facts. And then we finally pass judgment and punish someone, we're 100% certain that person did commit the crime. And similarly, in the research world, it's the same type of thing. We want to believe that people do such thorough research that by the time they write their paper up and it gets reviewed, the only things that get published in the scientific literature are things that are 100% accurate and totally reliable. That's the dream of the perfect world. If the world were perfect, the legal system would have complete certainty and would achieve this wonderful ideal word, justice. We would achieve justice by having complete knowledge and never making any mistakes in the legal system. And in the research world, we would have complete accuracy by doing such a thorough job, and papers would only be published when they're 100% accurate. And we would end up with this literature that is completely reliable because there are no mistakes made in it. That's the dream in the two separate worlds, but they're very similar in the dynamics that behind that. Now, here's the problem. And this is where we come in. This is why this is all relevant to what we do. The problem is everybody's driven by a good story. That is probably the bigger problem than anything else. And I'll argue that. And I think that that's what David argues in his articles. The catchphrase we use is that narrative is everything. And in a world of too much information as we have today, narrative drives all this sort of stuff. And so you end up with the facts telling us one thing, but then everybody being drawn in by a better story. Like, well, I think it's maybe that. And that leads then to the nightmare of reality. And the reality is, in the legal world, you get people just driven by the good story dynamics, and they desperately want to know who is the murderer. We got to solve this thing. And you get police departments rounding up people and finding a reasonable suspect. Next thing you know, the lawyers manage to argue it powerfully, and the jury goes for it, and somebody gets convicted who really was innocent. But that's everybody falling victim to these narrative dynamics that we're kind of vulnerable to. In a similar way, the same thing happens in the research world, is that everybody wants a headline. They want banner news that we found the toxin. Look, this is the thing that causes this cancer. Oh my goodness, really? And there's a tendency to go ahead and publish it because it makes for such a good story. People relax or go beyond their critical skills. And this is the fundamental dilemma and divide we've got between narrative versus numerics. The data, the numerics, the evidence tell us one thing, but the narrative quite often can just well, that's a great story. Okay, and the net result in the legal system is that you end up with the lynch mob. That's what the lynch mob is. This person seems close enough. Let's go ahead and lynch them. We're not sure that they did it, but I got a gut feeling, and we don't have the data or the evidence, but let's just go ahead and lynch them. And in the research world, you end up with things being published because they seem pretty close to right or all sorts of flaws in the system. And the net result of the nightmare of the research world is you end up with literature that is just plain wrong. And it's been published and accepted and it's out there and it's talked about. And that's the key word there. And in fact, that is going to be the Dobzhansky, the whole key word for David and his visit with us. And guess what? That word wrong, that happens to be the title of his wonderful 2010 book that was very popular. The title of the book was Wrong: Why Experts Keep Failing Us and How to Know When Not to Trust Them. And actually, there's an asterisk there on the word experts, and you look down there, what that's referring to is scientists, finance wizards, doctors, relationship gurus, celebrity CEOs, high-powered consultants, health officials, and more. So yes, we are overrun by all these experts that are constantly making mistakes and bad predictions on and on and on, and they're just plain wrong. So that's what this whole visit with Dave is about. He's really one of the world's experts on wrong and being wrong. And now let me hit on three major milestones here that also set up the context of why we're so interested and connected with what he writes. In 2005, there was this epidemiologist, I believe would be the formal title for him, at Stanford University, very prominent, John Ioannidis, and it's spelled, I guess it's Greek, but in David's article, he gives us the phonetic pronunciation, and we believe it's Ioannidis. Okay, so 2005, Ioannidis published this paper that basically said most of the literature is wrong. And that's it in a nutshell. Shocked a lot of people. In 2010, David, with his wonderfully critical mind, plucked this topic out of the whole biomedical world and wrote this popular sort of translation of it to a much bigger and broader audience, published in The Atlantic, where he's a longtime writer for. And this really profound article titled Lies, Damn Lies in Medical Science, 2010, November 2010, in The Atlantic. When you look at the subtitle of the article, it says, much of what medical researchers conclude in their studies is misleading, exaggerated, or flat out wrong. So why are doctors, to a striking extent, still drawing upon misinformation in their everyday practice? Dr. John Ioannidis has spent his career challenging his peers by exposing their bad science. Now, wouldn't you have thought that that would have brought about a sea change for the whole science world? I mean, in the Atlantic, you can't get a whole lot broader for a venue than that. And yet, we're going to ask David, did this really, did Ioannidis' work in anything change anything in the system? And the bottom line is that this was sounding the alarm in 2010. Your whole profession is not ready for a challenge. And guess what happened in 2020? The pandemic appeared, and that was the gargantuan challenge. And how'd that go for the biomedical community? How's it going today with CDC? This is an absolute unmitigated nightmare that's emerged. And there were these warning signs way back then that were, as far as I can tell, we're not yielded to at all. So, okay, a few more specifics here, and then I'm going to bring Matthew in to discuss this with me. But this is the actual paper that Ioannidis published in 2005 in PLOS, whatever that stands for, publication of Public Library of Science, I guess. The title is Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. Could it be any simpler or more profound than that? And there you see, if you're looking at this visually, the slides, you see the abstract. And as I say, he said the building's on fire. The whole landscape is on fire. The whole biomedical community really is on fire. Let's take a look at the specifics of the abstract for his paper. It began with this sentence: there is increasing concern that most current published research findings are false. Could the building be any more on fire, the whole landscape? And deeper into this abstract, you see it says, simulations show that for most study designs and settings, it is more likely for a research claim to be false than true. Your whole profession has jumped the track. What are you going to do about it? It's unbelievable. And now here's what concerns me is go back up there to the second sentence of this abstract and look at what he says here. The probability that a research claim is true may depend on study power and bias, the number of other studies on the same question, and importantly, the ratio of true to no relationships, blah, 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 whatever. Look back there at what I put into blue, the two words study power. And looking at this yesterday, that caught my eye. And I know what that's about. That is about power analysis. I had biostatistics, 2 semesters of it as an undergraduate at the University of Washington. And I know what power analysis is. Here, just searching on Google, this is what it says. Power analysis is a crucial pre-study statistical method used to determine the minimum sample size needed to detect a true meaningful effect while minimizing false negatives, type 2 errors, by balancing sample size, significance level, effect size, and statistical power, often set at 80%. It ensures efficient, reliable research. Oh, that sounds so simple and easy. In fact, when I read it to Matthew this morning, we were discussing about talking about this stuff. He said, "Okay, sounds reasonable to me." It's kind of like the ABT, on the surface, it sounds very simple. Oh, that makes sense. But actually, there's a lot of complexity inside of this. And again, this power analysis. And just to verify this, and hopefully next week, my good buddy Diana Padilla, who took the same biostatistics courses with me at UW long ago, I called her up spur of the moment. She answered on her cell phone, and I said, "Is it not the case that the vast majority of scientists that we know don't even really know what power analysis is? There's a lot to it. And this is the fundamental part of the dynamic of designing really robust experimentation and studies that really can stand up to critical scrutiny." And I know it as a scientist in my career. I spent a lot of time thinking about this and tried to find other scientists to discuss it with, and there were very few. Most of them like, yeah, it's kind of something to do with your error system. There's a lot to it, to digesting it. And, you know, as it says here, gee, it sounds so simple. It ain't that simple. And then in the Unides paper, Unides, whatever it is, he's got a whole bunch of corollaries that support this whole premise that the scientific literature is a mess. For example, here's one of his corollaries. The hotter a scientific field with more scientific teams involved, the less likely the research findings are to be true. There's so much noise in this profession, and they don't want to talk about it. So, Matthew, how about if you join me now? And these are 3 questions that I'm thinking of for David. But actually, before I dive into my questions, what do you think that you'd like to ask him next Wednesday? Because you read the whole paper yesterday and I think took it in a pretty deep level. And you've been working intensely now with scientists for 6 years and in an interesting way, in that you're not doing research with them. You're trying to help them communicate what they've done for research, and you're trying to absorb what they've got for a story to tell, and yet you don't have the science background to understand their, nor do any of us. I don't have the time to sit there and absorb their entire field of study. You don't have to. There's 2 parts to communication. There's the content and the form. We are just people that work on form, and so we don't need to know the content entirely. But you've had a lot of experience with this. So on that note, tell me what you thought about the paper to begin with. The article, Lamb Lies, Damn Lies in Medical Science.
I loved it and was horrified by it.
There you
That's
go.
that's the quick headline. I
Yeah.
it's this problem. It's like you put it, Randy. It's the problem of the singular narrative. Like I would love this world in which the public understood that it's science is not eureka science. It's not just ooh flashy headline, ooh another big discovery, ooh another big discovery. It's this kind of slow process. It kind of meanders around for a while, and eventually you get the big breakthrough. But a lot of it is trial and error, and you find out there's a lot of errors, and that's the accepted way that it is. Like scientists kind of know this, but the public has this huge gap in which we think everyone's Einstein and it's all just discovery, discovery, discovery.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's what
So,
we're attracted to.
all right. So then, based on what you just said there, do you think realistically that we can get the public to understand how science works, and then they'll be comfortable with all this noise?
Absolutely not. That is never, ever going to happen. We are too programmed for the singular narrative. We
Yeah.
are way too, and this goes back to like psychological principles, like cognitive misers. Like we have this really expensive organ in our heads called the brain. It takes a lot of caloric power to use, so we find all these ways, all these like heuristics to quickly get us through life. And one of them is the singular narrative. It's just the simple story, and being able to hold these two ideas in our head at the same time, that science is valuable and important, it needs to be done, but it makes a lot of mistakes. That's really hard. It's really hard to put those two things together. And for most people, it's just not going to happen. So the only answer I can think of is scientists need to be much better communicators as to what they're actually trying to do.
Oh, really?
Reasonable things. Yeah,
What,
how reasonable those results should be
do you
taken.
have any suggestions on how they could get better at communication?
Gosh, if only, Randy, if only some group has been working on it for intensely
If
for
only they
like,
had a model.
yeah, exactly. If only they had some sort of framework, perhaps, in which they could
Oh my
like help
God.
speed them along. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so then let's have you take a shot at crafting three questions before we get into my three questions. What's your first question you would ask for David?
Boy, I think my first question is how receptive have scientists been to this message that they need to be more
Oh,
realistic?
that's really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think just the simple question of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Really boiling it down.
You
What
remember
happened?
you
Like,
remember
how
that
many
scene?
death threats did you get?
Well, you remember that scene from Tootsie? Bill Murray's the theater director, and he
Mhm.
says, "I hate it when my play is terrible and people come up to me afterwards and say, 'Oh, that was really, really great.'" He said, "What I prefer is somebody just walks up and says, 'What happened?'" I think that's a relevant question for this paper, which is so damn good,
Mm.
but it didn't change. It didn't fix things in 2010. I didn't see the whole scientific world. I didn't see Science or Nature magazine suddenly stopping the whole system dead and saying, "Oh my God, we've got a problem. We've got to address." It just didn't happen. It should have. It should have been national world news that the science world has suddenly been woken up by John Ioannidis saying your literature is a mess. Stop the presses and fix it. But nothing to that effect. The machine just kept on going, and I don't. So anyhow, what happened? That's good. Can you make a note of that? That's really better
What
than.
happened? Sure.
Yeah, that's better than my questions. All right, you're one for one. Let's have a second question from me. What happened? That's very simple. Next.
Let's see. Next question for me.
Yeah.
So what happened? And I want to know what his take on the fix is.
Hmm.
Like we have our own, we have our model, we have our framework. I'm kind of curious as to see like what angle he
Well,
would
okay, okay.
versus.
Can if you got the paper sitting right there, can you jump to those last two paragraphs? We were talking about that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's where the gold was. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
So, and this is from Ioannidis himself, a quote from him. Science is a noble endeavor, but it's also a low yield endeavor. I'm not sure that more than a very small percentage of medical research is ever likely to lead to major improvements in clinical outcomes and
Whoa, whoa,
quality
whoa,
of
whoa,
life.
whoa. Okay, let's slow that line right there down. Say it again, nice and slowly. Let's let all the listeners soak that in.
Yeah. I'm not sure that more than a very small percentage of medical research is ever likely to lead to major improvements in clinical outcomes and quality of lives. We should be very comfortable with that fact.
So that's interesting. You see, that's sort of a public relations issue, which is don't expect so much out of science.
Right.
That
And
gets
I,
interesting. That gets interesting because it connects with a number of years ago. The New Yorker had a really good article about expectations in the emergency room, and they had this factoid that like 80% of the people who bring in a loved one with a heart attack expect them to pull out the paddles and bring the person back to life.
Mhm.
And in the real world, it's only like 15% that miracle happens. But on TV, 80% of, because that makes for a better story. You always got to bring the person back. Nobody wants to watch the person die in a story. And so you get all these poor families sitting there furious, like, why couldn't you save our dad, on TV? They always save him. Well, sorry. Um, and that's parallel to what that part is about there, which is setting the public's expectations of science. And God, that ties in so much to the pandemic because this is what I feel
Mm.
like saying to a lot of these people who are so furious about how the pandemic was mismanaged. What do you expect? A virus came in out of nowhere, and did you really expect to have zero deaths from this newly morphed virus that, was so vicious. A whole lot of things kind of had to go wrong. That I think that connects with what's being said there, which is the public's got to have more realistic expectations of what the science world can accomplish, I think.
The public has to have more realistic expectations, and like like he says here, scientists have to be comfortable with the fact that a lot of what they do is not going to lead to these big eureka breakthroughs.
Yeah,
It's
that
just not
well,
going to
exactly, and all
happen.
the same thing.
Yeah,
Exactly. And yeah,
it's on both sides.
yeah, and that the doctors can't save 85% of the people that come in with a heart attack. That's
Right,
that's the reality of it all.
right.
Um, all right. So what was that question there that you had down for? What was the simple form of that?
The simple form was, oh
What does he
boy,
think? What's his solution?
yeah. What exactly? What's his solution?
And you got one more. Take a shot at.
Uh, this actually it kind of ties in with question two. Like what I see as the big problem that this article highlights is a bad incentive structure. There is a terrible incentive structure, and this incentive structure is we need to publish results,
Mm-hmm.
big flashy headline results, or else we're not going to get
Oh,
funding.
okay. Wait a second. So incentive. You want there to be an incentive for what?
I want there to be still incentives to do research, even if the result is like, oh yeah, it's not true. Like, oh yeah, we
Yeah,
didn't
no,
find
no
anything.
results.
Yeah,
But I think
exactly.
I think at a deeper level, what you're saying is you want there to be incentives for just the literature to be accurate.
Yes,
Whether,
I
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Right now, the incentives are just for the big headlines.
yeah,
There's no incentive structure for accuracy.
yeah, yeah.
Is there something that we can do to change the incentive structure? Like
And
how
and
could that
then
even begin?
Yeah, and then you start to, this just meshers right into the whole media-driven society, which is that almost all these branches of media and most of the science media, the science and nature and all those things, they're all money-making ventures. This is the problem, is that, God, there's so many dimensions to this. There's that poor guy years ago that cracked into at MIT, cracked into a bunch of the major journals that cost a fortune to get access to their knowledge in there, and the guy downloaded it all and posted it for free for everybody. Look, here's your knowledge. And they caught him, and he ended up, going to prison and all kinds of horrible things they did to him. When in fact, what he was driven by was this desire to get the knowledge outside of the paywalls. But that's what's so screwed up in today's world is that, yeah, the arbiters of the truth and accuracy are money making machines. And as
Mhm.
soon as that happens, you can't, there goes the trust out the window. So, what was that third question in simple form?
Incentive structure. How can we fix the incentive
It's
structure, changing
very
it
cool.
from headlines to accuracy?
Your questions are so much smarter than mine. All right, what are my questions? Um, all right, and so maybe we end up with six questions because I definitely want to ask him this. Very simple. How many scientists know what power analysis means? And in the Ioannidis paper there, the second sentence, he's referring to power analysis as though it's just a routine part of science. It's not a routine part of science. And I'm hoping that Diana Padilla will be there to back me up on this because I'm telling you, I asked her how many people that we know and scientists really understand power analysis, and she said very few. So it's a fundamental part of experimental design, and yet most people, it's too complicated. There's too much to it. And that's what happened to you and me this morning, by the way, was I had a first draft of what I was going to be saying here, and I tried to explain to you power analysis. And the next thing we knew, you said, you're in the middle of a bunch of spaghetti, pal. And so I gave up on that. Yeah. And second question, how much does everyone want to celebrate findings? That's kind of tied in the incentive thing, is
Mhm.
that's basic narrative dynamics. We cheer for the active protagonist. That's one of the number one rule coming out of arc plot structure. These are the stories that we've told ourselves for thousands of years, 4,000 years, going back to Gilgamesh. We don't cheer for the passive protagonist. We don't cheer for the null result. These things are interwoven. It's in my Houston book 10 years ago. It's so hard for this stuff to get across to a lot of people. But this is where we're still driven by these narrative dynamics that emerged in the brain at least 4,000 years ago. Nothing's changed. And so we're still caught up in all these human dynamics. And then we have all these scientists that think, well, no, I'm trained as a scientist. I'm this objectivist machine. And at that point, I point people to 2010 60 Minutes when Morally Safer interviewed the magician Ricky Jay. and the whole segment was about the financial collapse that happened back then, but basically the Ponzi schemes. And he asked Ricky Jay, who's a magician, he said, who would be your ideal audience for your magic tricks? Who are the easiest people to fool? And he said, ideally, it would be a group of Nobel Prize winning scientists. Nobody is easier to fool than them because they think they know everything and they just yada, yada, yada. I just, that clip should be playing on a billboard in Times Square for everybody to see for the rest of eternity. So anyhow, third question, has John Ioannidis actually accomplished anything? That's back to the what happened question. So that was my thing exactly. All of that hot air and his paper and all the fluff and blah, 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 blah. What there wasn't, and this is kind of sad in today's world, and this is what happened with the pandemic, was once upon a time there was a mindset when something catastrophic is revealed, you put together a congressional inquiry, and that's what they did in the wake of 9/11. The whole Congress, the whole country, that was one of the last, remnants of that sort of mindset of singular leadership of we need to do a congressional investigation and get to the bottom of what went wrong here. We need to fix it for the rest of time. People used to think that way. It's not possible anymore. And that really is a shame. And the Ioannidis thing should have, followed by David H. Freedman's article in the Atlantic 2010, should have resulted in a congressional committee and a giant report, the Ioannidis report or something like that, into how bad is it and what can we do to fix it. But nothing like that. They just keep on chasing their tails, running on and on and on. And so I have my own suggestion of how I would address this, but I'll save that for next week, talking with David. And where are we for time right now?
We're at 26 minutes.
Oh, there you go. That's as much as I wanted to do here. So this is just a little warm up for everybody if you listen to it. And join us next Wednesday, February 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 o'clock Eastern. If you haven't RSVP'd, go to our website or whatever and find where's the RSVP thing? People can find it.
It's on Eventbrite. I'll make sure that there's a link in there.
Okay, and you can find it through our Substack account, ABT
Yes,
Agenda.
as well.
And yeah, let's have lots of people show up there and for a 90-minute discussion to get into all this stuff. And because things sure are a shambles right now. So couldn't hurt to talk about it. All right. Thanks. See everybody next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, gang.